The Story of the Gardener and the Storm. Once there lived an old gardener named Thomas who had spent his entire life tending to a beautiful garden on the outskirts of a small town. His garden was famous far and wide. Roses bloomed in the most vibrant colors, fruit trees bent under the weight of their harvest, and vegetables grew so abundantly that they supplied the entire neighborhood. Thomas had his daily rhythm, which he had followed for decades. Every morning he would rise with the first rays of sun, drink tea made from herbs from his garden, and slowly walk among the flower beds. He knew exactly when to water each plant, when to prune, when to fertilize. His hands knew every stone, every root, every leaf. One day, however, a storm came like no one could remember. The wind howled all night, rain poured in torrents, and lightning tore across the sky. In the morning, when Thomas went out to his garden, his heart clenched with pain. Half the trees were uprooted, the flower beds destroyed, the greenhouse shattered. What he had built his entire life lay in ruins. He sat on an old tree stump and wept. Neighbors came and pitied him. "Thomas, what a misfortune! All that work for nothing!" But the old gardener, when his tears had dried, stood up and said, "Perhaps this is a gift." People looked at him with wonder. How could such destruction be a gift? Thomas, however, began to carefully observe his destroyed garden. He noticed that where the old trees had fallen, sunlight now reached places that had previously been in shadow. He saw that the storm had uncovered new water springs. He observed that some plants that had seemed weak had survived the storm and now looked stronger than ever before. "You know," he told his neighbors, "my garden was beautiful, but perhaps too orderly. Perhaps some plants couldn't develop because others were shading their light. Perhaps I held too tightly to old ways and wasn't open to new possibilities." And so he began again. This time, however, he didn't work only according to old customs. He listened to the soil, observed where water naturally flowed, where plants had sprouted on their own from scattered seeds. Where only roses had grown before, he now let wildflowers grow, which attracted butterflies and bees. Instead of regular rows of vegetables, he created natural plant communities that helped each other. Over the months, the garden transformed into something completely new. It was wilder, but at the same time more harmonious. The plants looked healthier, the harvest was richer, and the whole place radiated a different energy. People said the garden now looked like a magical place from a fairy tale. Thomas realized that the storm had shown him something important about himself. His whole life he had stuck to the same methods because they worked for him, but he had stopped being open to change. The crisis forced him to abandon what no longer worked and discover new possibilities that he had carried within himself all along but hadn't dared to explore. "You know," he confided to his granddaughter Anna, who came to visit him, "that storm was like a teacher, a painful teacher, but a teacher. It taught me that sometimes we must lose what we cling to in order to discover what we truly need." Anna, who was going through her own crisis, she had lost her job and didn't know what to do with her life, listened carefully. "But grandfather, how do I know if a crisis is good? How do I know what to do?" The old gardener smiled and pointed to a small seedling that had grown between the stones where the garden shed used to stand. "Do you see this little plant? I don't know what it is. I never planted it. But it's growing where it found the right conditions. Crisis is like that storm. It removes what is fragile or no longer functional, but at the same time creates space for something new." "So I should just wait?" Anna asked. "No, dear. You must be like me after the storm. Observe, listen, and be open to what wants to be born. Crisis shows you what you no longer need, but it also gives you the opportunity to discover who you truly are and what you truly want." Thomas continued, When I was young, I thought happiness meant that nothing would change, that I would always have the same garden, the same methods, the same life. But now I know that happiness is the ability to grow, change, and accept challenges as opportunities. Anna spent the entire summer with her grandfather and observed how he worked with the new garden. She noticed that he still had his morning routine. He rose with the sunrise, drank tea, and walked through the garden. But now he had added something new to this routine, a moment of silence when he just sat and listened. He listened to the birds, the wind, but also to his inner voice. "Grandfather, why is that morning routine so important?" she asked one day. "You know, Anna, routine is like the roots of a tree. It gives me stability and strength to face any storms. When I know that every morning I'll start the day calmly and with a clear mind, I'm prepared for whatever the day brings. Routine helps me stay in touch with myself." Thomas explained to her that regular habits are like an anchor in the stormy sea of life. When crisis comes, everything seems chaotic and uncertain. But when you have your rituals, whether it's morning meditation, evening reading, or simply a regular walk, you have something you can rely on. These small daily acts remind you who you are even when everything around you is changing. During the summer, Anna began building her own routines. Every morning, she wrote down 3 things she was grateful for. In the evening before sleep, she read and reflected on what she had learned that day. Gradually, she found that she felt calmer and more balanced, even though her life situation hadn't yet been resolved. "Routine gives me a sense that I have control over at least something," she confided to her grandfather. "Even when I don't know what tomorrow will bring, I know how I'll start the morning." Thomas nodded. "Exactly. And you know what? When you have a stable inner foundation, thanks to routines, you're much better prepared to recognize the opportunities that crisis brings. A calm mind sees more clearly." At the end of summer, Anna found a new job. Not the kind she had been looking for, but one that truly fulfilled her. It was work in a community garden where she taught children to grow vegetables. She realized that if she hadn't lost her original job, she would never have embarked on this path. "Thank you, grandfather," she said when saying goodbye. "You taught me that crisis isn't an end, but a beginning, and that routines aren't boring repetition, but a way to stay strong and prepared for changes." Thomas smiled and handed her a small seedling from that plant that had grown between the stones. "Take it with you. Let it remind you that even in the most unexpected places, something beautiful can grow." Positive effects of routine on our inner peace. As Thomas's story shows, regular routines are a powerful tool for maintaining inner peace and stability. Morning and evening rituals give us structure that calms the mind and reduces daily decision fatigue. When we know that our mornings and evenings will have a certain order, we feel safer and more balanced. Regular habits support our cognitive functions and can even free up space for greater creativity. When we expend less energy on repetitive tasks, we can better focus on more complex challenges. Routine also helps people gain a sense of control over their daily lives. Meditation and mindfulness, incorporated into daily routine, bring reduced stress levels, improved emotional health, and greater resilience to challenging situations. Regular exercise, as part of routine, has similar effects to some antidepressants, and just 30 minutes daily can lead to improved mental well-being. Routines also help us train positive inner dialogue. When we consciously create space each day for positive thoughts and gratitude, we gradually change ingrained thought patterns toward greater contentment and peace. Most importantly, routines become our anchor in times of change and crisis. They provide us with a stable foundation from which we can face any storms of life with greater balance and wisdom.